Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With FishingBooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. FishingBooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to FishingBooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today. Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With FishingBooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. FishingBooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to FishingBooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.
Welcome to DSC's Campfires with Larry Weishuhn, a unique blend of hunting, fishing, wildlife conservation, and the outdoor lifestyle. DSC's Campfires is brought to you by DSC, Conservation, Education, and Advocacy. Hornady, accurate, deadly, dependable. Taurus, award-winning revolvers and pistols. Stealth Vision, high-tech, precision-driven equipment for today's modern hunter. Red 55 Winery, signature wines from Emmy Award-winning country artist Miranda Lambert, owned by Rick and Beverly Lambert. And the Choctaw Hunting Lodge, home of some of the finest hunting in North America. Now, here's Larry.
Dr. Mike Arnold, welcome back once again to the DSC's Campfires with Larry Weishuhn. That's me, by the way, if you hadn't guessed it by now.
Boy, I tell you what, I'll say it again. You're a glutton for punishment. You're trying to drive your ratings down. But anyway, thank you for having me back on.
Oh, I wouldn't dream of not having you back on as many opportunities as I can. You know, we've talked, before a little bit. I'm about to embark, and by the time that folks hear this, I will probably have already been, but I'm about to embark on a Three Nations roe deer hunt that was donated to us by Stephen and Sophia Bankston with Scandinavian Pro Hunters and to the DSC Foundation Gala in 2025. And Mark and Carol Little bought that hunt, and we're about to leave. And every once in a while you kind of refer to yourself as a nerdy professor. So I want to delve into that, and then we'll get a little bit into the hunting side of things as well. The roe deer has always fascinated me, and I know it has you from our conversations in the past.
It does. I mean, ironically, I'm sitting here looking at a second screen with my computer, and it has me crouched down behind a roebuck that I took in off the western coast of, internal the western coast of Scotland, up in the Highlands. And
right.
But my first one that I took was with Steph and Sophia in Sweden, and
right.
And it was a beautiful old buck. I mean, he was really, really old, and he just had spikes on his head. In fact, I sent the photo. It wasn't you that made the tacky comment because you're nicer, but I sent it to another buddy. And I said, "Look what I got." And he asked me if his false teeth had fallen out when I shot him. I love these little guys. I really love, and I'm very jealous of you and your three nation hunt. But little browsers, and they can exist on pretty much anything, I guess.
Apparently they can. The roe deer is pretty much scattered all over Europe, and I know there's a Siberian roe deer subspecies as well too. That's probably it is bigger and also produces bigger antlers. But this particular hunt's going to start in Sweden, and I've shot roe deer there in the past in Sweden, and then we're going to go from there to Poland, where I have not hunted roe deer. Then go from there to Scotland, and I've hunted roe deer in Scotland in conjunction with a red stag up in the high country or the Highlands. And unfortunately, we could not find anything that even looked like a roe deer when we got into the country where they were supposed to exist. But so I'm really anxious to get back in there. The roe deer, from a biological perspective, is a very interesting animal as far as I'm concerned in a lot of different ways. From all indications that I've been getting out of Stefan and a bunch of other people in Europe and in that part of the world, those bucks are just now have come into hard antler. I mean, we're talking when we're visiting here. We're not even May yet, and they live in the northern hemisphere, and yet from what I can learn is they generally shed or cast those antlers in like November. That's contra to most everything else that occurs. Do you think there's something, being from a genetic background that you are, do you think there's a reason for this from a genetic perspective or something?
I don't know. That's the thing. You and I have talked about this before,
right.
and I've looked into it as well, and it's so odd. Now, I would think that it has to be selection that has been on these little animals, and that the bucks need those. They need those antlers at a different time of year than what, you normally see. And what we see in white-tailed deer or whatever else we're thinking about, it's almost like, but you have these odd species like axis deer and
exactly
that
right.
don't have, now axis deer are different anyway, as you know. I mean, they don't have really a season where they need the testosterone. The bucks or stags need the testosterone at a specific time, because it's whenever they start growing their antlers, that indicates that they're active sexually.
Right.
And the females are active sexually throughout the year. The only thing I can think of, and I don't know this, maybe you do, biologically, maybe the females are, obviously the males are going to be pairing up with the females when those females are in estrus. And it's got to match. You and I both know that, or they're not going to be having babies. So the only thing I can think of is that, they're casting their antlers, and that's because, they don't need them right then, and they don't need the testosterone right then for mating. But I will say these are odd little animals. The one that I shot with Steph, with Scandinavian Pro Hunters, outfitters in Sweden, that buck was with females at the wrong time of the year, because he was with a group of females, and Steph was amazed. He said, I don't know what he's doing. They were laying down in a field, and we had to wait for him to stand up about 250 yards away or whatever it was. And he whispered to me, I have no clue why he's with those does, with those roe deer females. He said that he shouldn't be right now. And his conclusion was he was so old he didn't even realize they were females because he was blind. And I told him that was ugly and unkind about my trophy that I just took. But, maybe he was just an old guy that was like past breeding, and he wasn't thinking about females. But you're right. Biologically, these are, I don't know, I just think they're such cool little animals, and I'll hunt them anytime I get a chance when I'm in Europe.
Well, I will too, and going back like with the axis deer, as I recall from research years ago that we were involved in, they produce viable sperm year-round. Outside of the time, year-round, whether they have hard antlers or in velvet or not, and from what I can recall. And I wonder about the roe deer being, that same way. Of course, they also are, we're talking about the females, the breeding season that will occur during the summertime, but at the same time, for the most part, those embryos do not settle into the uterus, I guess, until much later. So they have kind of delayed implantation, which really makes no sense. I can understand that, because generally the rut occurs with most deer species or things of that nature at a time so that whatever the gestation period is, that those fawns or young are born at the most opportune nutritional time of the year. And that does occur with the roe deer. But the breeding season occurs way ahead of the time of the fact that embryo attaches and starts developing.
Yeah, it's, they match their environments, but
Right.
they also, that's the other thing. This photo I'm looking at of this roebuck that I took in Scotland, and you're right, boy, up there in the Highlands, we didn't see, I'm trying to remember, we just saw a handful of roe deer, females, of course, we weren't interested in. This was the only buck that we saw, and we were covering territory looking for roebuck. But the thing about it is, think about all the thing that puzzles me or amazes me is their breadth of habitat they can utilize. Because those highlands are not, as you know, because you've hunted there, they're not prime habitat for anything that is eating green. I mean, they're really wrestling with an environment that's not great. I mean,
it's harsh.
They're eating trees, tree seedlings, and that's not the best browse for these animals for nutrition. So, but then again, y'all are gonna. I mean, in Sweden, we shot him in an agricultural field, and so that was good habitat for them. They were browsing, yes, but I bet you any amount of money they were also eating whatever they had their winter wheat or whatever the heck it was. So
absolutely. Well, I was there, and I'm trying to remember the exact time. It was a little bit later than the springtime. It was more in early fall or late spring, summer, fall period kind of thing, because I've been over a couple of different times. But I got some great photos of some of the roe deer in agricultural fields, as you just mentioned, both bucks and does. And one of the one that I shot basically not very far off the shoreline of the water that separates Sweden from Denmark. I mean, you could actually see Copenhagen. I think in one or two of the photographs we shot across the water, you can see that there's a city there, and it just happens to be Copenhagen. And where we were hunting there was a little bit of forest, if you will, but for the most part, it was a grassy plain when you got right down to it. And then when I hunted with some of the other guys a little bit later on in that same hunt, we were hunting kind of like you would the edge on white-tailed deer, the edge between grassy fields. And trying to recall the first ones I hunted in England, not very far from the Castle Corfe on a hunt that was, I was there with Jim Morey, who used to be with Swarovski, and we were hunting with Merwin Manningham Buller and borrowing his rifle actually while we were there. And I shot two of them there, one a really old one that shot in a huge grassy field with just a tree here and a tree there. And then the other one that I shot was along kind of a brushy creek bottom, but very much like some of the southeastern part of, where you have plains, like in the plains of Georgia or, the coastal plains kind of thing with the interspersion of trees. So, and yet too, when I was in Austria, on the Redursal Reserve, which is high up in the mountains there, right on the border of Italy, and a big chunk, it's a concession that's owned by the Swarovski family. The roe deer that we saw, and I didn't shoot one there. We were looking for one or two particular bucks, but they were up here in the almost above timberline. So you're right. It's amazing how adaptable those little rascals are.
Well, and I was talking to Joe Crute, who I hunted with, as you know, Royal Outfitters UK's, who I hunted with in Scotland, and I was asking him, because he's hunted all over, and he's hunted in England and guides and outfits in England, and of course up in Scotland. And the only thing I can conclude, okay, these little roebuck can grow and live in the Highlands, but I'm not sure it's their optimal habitat like you're describing.
Right.
I wonder if the optimal habitat isn't like we see white-tailed deer. Now, they're listed as a browser, right? I mean,
Right.
and that's what they can make their living doing. But they're not dumb. They'll come out and they're going to come out in a field, and that's why we put fields. Why y'all, in your management schemes, you're going to put fields out there that are wheat and whatever the heck it is, and the white-tailed deer are going to come out there into those fields and eat, as well as browse. And I don't know, I'm wondering if up in the highlands of wherever isn't marginal habitat overall for roebuck. In other words, they're going to prefer that mixture like you've just described so well.
Exactly. And it may be over the years, it's just kind of like here in Texas with black bear. Yes, years ago we used to have black bear. Mexico just down below us has got black bear. Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana has got black bear. And as those populations have grown to the point of, I don't really want to use the term carrying capacity, but a carrying capacity, they have moved into new areas. And so that may too have something to do with the little roe deer as well too, that those areas that they initially were in for so many years, got saturated with critters, and so they started looking for new territory.
Yeah, I think so. I think that I know in Scotland the bottom line is that Joe Crute and his outfit, and probably other folks I haven't met there you hunted with, the hunters are really supporting the spread of these, right? I mean,
right.
And I love my non-hunting friends who are puzzled by that, but I mean the fact of the matter is that in these managed areas, like I'm looking at in this photo, the major management of these areas is if you call it agriculture, but it's trees, right? And so the hunters, they're managing these populations. Joe and his outfit are managing these populations and balancing it between the $100 he brings in, keeps these little guys there, because otherwise the forestry folks would have in the past, paid somebody to go out there and get rid of everything that would nibble on their seedlings. So they're willing to, allow Joe to balance this with the red stags and the Sika deer introduced and the roebuck, so they're willing to let him do that because he pays them and they pay him some for managing. But it's this balanced system. But without that, there's no way I would have even seen that buck in the marginal habitat. So, I love the fact that and I'm sure it's the same way where those countries that you're going to as well, because they have a hunting heritage and that keeps the wildlife there.
Exactly. I'm real anxious to get into Poland. I assume I've never been there. I've been in Germany. I've been, around it and all that kind of thing. But I'm real interested to see what the habitat is there. Now, when I was in Finland a couple of years ago hunting whitetail, that area where we were in Finland too, it was forested and agriculture kind of thing. And apparently from what Stefan and the gentleman that we were hunting with, we're hunting several different large private properties, there were roe deer there as well too. Of course, the whitetail deer was introduced there in the 1930s and has done extremely well. That's a hunt somewhere down the way you really should try to do as well too, because the one that I ended up shooting weighed I think 320 pounds, whatever the equivalent of kilos is to that. And I can't remember the kilos. I can just remember they converted it for me. And he was about a 5-6-year-old deer and had like a 22-inch spread, 8 points, absolutely gorgeous kind of deer. But, and there was another reason for bringing that up. Whitetail deer were introduced there out of North America. Now, there have been several attempts over the years to bring roe deer to North America. But those attempts have always failed, and apparently even though they don't look the part, they're a very nervous kind of deer, and for whatever reason they do not travel well even when sedated or anything else. So that's probably the main reason that we do not have roe deer here in North America. I've always thought it'd be real interesting to go into the southeast, or and including Tennessee and Kentucky and some of those areas as well, into that, and establish a roe deer herd, within an enclosure kind of thing. But to my knowledge, and from what research I can do, there's never been a successful transplant of roe deer, particularly from Europe to North America.
Well, and I can believe, I mean, they are the ones that I've dealt with. Anyway, I haven't hunted them as much as you have. I've got a hunt planned for Latvia, once again with Royal Outfitters. And one of the reasons I want to go there is not just for the roe deer, it's to, and this is what I'm really jealous about, is for you, because y'all get to see all these different hunting cultures, and I want to see how this is, works in those mid-European, or whatever we want to call them,
right.
Eastern European areas. But getting back to the roebuck that I took in both places, when I was around roe deer, they were skittish. I mean, they seemed to be really, really wired. And when we were hunting and got this roebuck, my guide whispered to me as we came up, as we spotted him, he said, "You'll get an instant," because he was bedded down. He said, "When he comes up, you'll have an instant." And that, it was true. He came up and was crouching to bound in, a second,
right?
Literally a second. And so I took him just as he was about to leave our lives, and, we wouldn't have seen him again. And so, I can imagine trying to transport these little guys. They would die. It would. I can imagine that would be difficult to get them to an area, which is ironic if you think about it, because darn, they moved lions and everything else. You'd think they'd be able to figure out how to transport a little deer. But anyway, who knows? I would love having these in the U.S. I really, really would, and I think hunters would fall in love with them too, because they're not easy to hit, because there's a lot of air around these little guys and gals. So, and they also, I actually, let me ask you a question. I've never eaten roe deer. Have you?
Yes, I have. It's absolutely delicious. It reminded me a whole lot. Have you eaten the sika or sika deer there in Europe?
No, I got one, and they told me how great it was. No, everybody keeps telling me how great this meat is, and they don't feed it to me. So,
Okay.
Now the sika, what they told me about the sika deer was that it's so good that there's no way they would feed it to me. They were real nice about it, I said, but I shot one, and they said, "Yeah, you did." Thank you very much.
Yeah, you did. Thank you for shooting it for us. That belongs to us. To me, the sika or sika deer taste very similar to elk, although they're a little finer grained, and that's probably because of the fact that they're smaller for the most part. But the roe deer, and I've eaten it 2 or 3 different ways, and it was absolutely delicious in the fact that, to me, it reminded me kind of a cross between elk and whitetail, but there was no gamey flavor of any kind, and it was tender, and the ones that we were able to get meat from, that was in England, and Mervyn had shot some prior to our getting there, I think some does, as I recall, and they had hung probably in a cooler or cool weather for about a week, and you could cut it with a fork. And I asked him about the bucks, and he said, you can't tell the difference between a buck and a doe when you eat it, but it was outstanding. A little bit more, I guess maybe for most people it would taste like elk, which to me is kind of a cross. Then there, to me, there's not a whole lot of difference between elk and even the white-tailed deer that we're shooting these days, and this range-fed beef that I grew up on. So, let's get one more step. You mentioned the cultures, and to me, that has always been such an important part of hunting. I'm so thankful that over the years I've gotten to hunt so many different places to look at the cultures, to experience the cultures. And I think that's one of the things that you and I, among many other things that we share great in common kind of thing. You're working on another book, and we've talked about this in the past a little bit, but tell people a little bit more. You know, you've talked about some of the cultures in bringing back the wild, and you've got another one that you're working on right now. What about this one that you're working on now?
Well, I appreciate you asking. And so what this new one is going to be on, it's going to rely on talking about hunters and the endangered and I've laughed with you about this. That's the working title, and I'm going to talk about all of the different, I can't talk about all of them because there's too many darn examples, but I'm going to go around the world with talking about species that have been brought back from the brink, things like bison here in the U.S. and the Weishuhn in Europe, you know, the European bison and that sort of thing that have been brought back because of hunters and the culture of hunting all around the world, and why hunters are passionate about nature, and that it's not it's not primarily about taking or harvesting animals as much as it is, man, we just love being outside, and we love seeing all these animals there, and we want to see intact ecosystems and intact natural areas that hunters and non-hunters can enjoy. You know, it doesn't have to be a hunter enjoying it. No. In these, in the Highlands of Scotland, you know, there's hunters out there like me and you and other folks who are loving the place, but there are people just walking around looking at this, and the reason it's there, once again, is through hunters wanting to conserve those areas and bring back species that were indeed, endangered. And so that's what the new book's going to be. It's going to be everything from muskox to bison to, look, face it, anything east of the Mississippi I can talk about because, turkeys weren't here until the 1930s and, fill in the blank, white-tailed deer, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's a rich set of stories, and of course overseas is the same way. And so that's what I'm writing about.
Absolutely. As you were talking about that, I was thinking about the elk that's been reintroduced into Kentucky and some of those areas, Tennessee, and some other areas as well too. And there were great elk herds scattered all throughout the east of the Mississippi at one time, and apparently even a few buffalo, from what I can gather and visit with, or looking at some of the old journals and that kind of thing. So. Most interesting, and of course, you being from Texas, and I live in Texas, you look at some of the species that we have maintained here that have not done well in other parts of the world, like the nilgai from the Indian area kind of thing, and the Cimarron oryx and the Addax and the Dama gazelle, three of the animals that lived in the northern part of the Sahara that have not done well there at all. And even the Aoudad, which, is from up in the northern mountains of the northern part of the Sahara. All those are flourishing populations here in where I live in Texas and where you're from. So, there's some unbelievable stories there. And the only reason those animals do exist is because of the hunting side of things.
Exactly. And so those are the stories I want to tell, in this. And like, you just rattled off all these species. And unfortunately, my editors and book publishers, give me a word limit, and I don't like that, and I don't know why I'm not sure why. I always told the guys at Oxford University Press when I published 4 books with them, I said, I'm getting my feelings hurt here when you emphasize Mike, who can only write this number of words. I think they're telling me I'm wordy. And, I'm long-winded, but, we could write, you and I could sit down and list out all these species that we could write about on this, and it would fill a bookshelf. And I love that, right? It shows us what hunters have done, and in bringing back all of these different species, getting them away from the edge of extinction. And, I'm looking at a black springbuck on my wall here, and someone would say, well, that's just a color variant that folks have bred up. So hunters, and the answer is nope. They saw them in the, when the boars were trekking around, they recorded the black springbuck, and, it was in wild populations. But then again, it almost went extinct until hunters came in and said, those are beautiful animals. And so the landowners said, I can make money off of that. and by golly, they're back. And so there's so many examples, and I just love it. This book's going to write itself. I just have to make sure I don't make it too sciencey and boring. I don't want to produce a sleeping aid. I had 4 of those already.
That was in the academic world.
That was in the academic world. That was exactly right. That's what I told Jim Zumbo the other day when I was chatting with him. I said, I sent him my 2 last books, and I said, I won't send you my first 4. I'm proud of those books now, but they were for a very different reason.
Absolutely. Another species or subspecies or whatever that came to mind is the golden oryx. I used to go to Namibia with Fred Burchell, and Fred unfortunately has passed away, but Fred really was the one that really kind of brought that back. He started these golden oryx apparently were there. Same thing. You look at some of the old journals from the Boers, and basically a golden oryx is a gemsbuck, looks like a gemsbuck, but not in color, because where there's gray, it's more of a cream color, and where there's black, there is kind of a reddish golden color. And their horns are even lighter colored. But I traveled with Fred all over Namibia looking for these animals, and then he would go in these wild natural herds, and they would capture them, and they started putting them together, and now, I mean, there's quite a few of them. But those kind of stories go on and on and on. Now, with that, with the book that you're working on, but also with your Bringing Back the Wild podcast, you can cover a lot of those. Tell people a little bit about your podcast. I've been very fortunate and blessed to have been on it, and I'm truly honored to have been there. But tell people a little bit about that while I got you on the horn here on the phone.
Well, I appreciate that. I laughed. I kidded somebody the other day, Matt Burgess, who's of course a friend of both of ours, and I gave him a hard time, by the way, y'all, because Matt's up there and just harvested, golly, it was a beautiful polar bear, and Larry reaches out immediately on Facebook, says, I got to get you on my podcast, and I was, I put my little 2 cents worth in after the fact and said, yeah, you need to be on mine as well, but you know what? It has been, folks, Bringing Back the Wild is the name of the podcast, and the reason it's called that is because that's exactly what we talk about. And the reason I'm doing this podcast is this gentleman's fault and my wife Frances's fault, and they were bugging me forever. Oh, you ought to do a podcast.
Yes.
And Frances said, remember, you're like your mama. And I said, what do you mean? She said, you could get a fence post ad for you. And so I said, thank you, dear. But it is true. I love talking to folks about this, what you and I have been talking about today. And by the way, folks, it'll be past this, but Larry is my repeat client.
I love it.
And the next episode that comes out is actually Mr. Weishuhn, Mr. Whitetail once again is on my next episode, and so I appreciate your support in that. But yeah, we discuss conservation, we discuss hunting, we discuss all the different things that you and I are passionate about, and I love being able to chat with folks, and folks have been like you, have been so supportive and been willing to come on, and folks like DSC are supporting it, or sponsors. So boy, I tell you what, I've been very, very fortunate already, and I do laugh and say, if Larry stopped his, tens of thousands of people would notice. If I stopped mine, Larry and Francis would notice. So. That's not quite true, but
no.
It's going real well. It really is going real well, and I'm very, very fortunate and loving doing it. I really am loving doing it.
As well it should be, because it is a great, great podcast, and you have a very entertaining manner of getting people to respond to all kinds of questions and come up with all kinds of different answers from them. And I applaud you for doing what you did. Now, you mentioned DSC, and I know you've got some things you got to go do this morning, and I am actually later today, when this is being recorded, going down to the coast of Texas to be in a fishing competition tomorrow between the Texas Outdoor Writers group, of which I'm one of the 14 members on, with some of the states up farther north, up in the Northeast, I think, and Midwest, who also are sending down fishing teams. So I got to study up on fishing before I get out of here. But you mentioned DSC. Now, you and I are both huge supporters. I've been around DSC for a long, long time, and if somebody wants to come spend time with you, person to person kind of thing, not just, hear you on podcast and read your things in Game Trails and Sports and Field, God, all those other publications you write for, you will be at the DSC Summer Gala, our summer show, and the DSC Foundation Gala in July, which are 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th. At the Gaylord Texan Resort, a fabulous place there in Grapevine, Texas. So you are going to be there, right?
Oh boy, and you know what? I can't even keep Francis from going with me. So yeah, we're both going to be there. I was there last year, and I told y'all this. I wasn't planning on going last year, and that was the first time I've ever gone. I just, I go to other shows, and I thought, I'm not going to. And then I ended up going. I will not miss the Summer Expo. I'm not going to miss the regular convention either with DSC because I enjoy myself, and it's so great for us. I mean, in terms of interviewing folks, and that, and connecting with folks and all. But boy, that Summer Expo / Gala is just wonderful. And so I will encourage everybody, please, consider going to it, because you will have a wonderful time. It's just, it's a bit smaller than the regular show. I can't remember sort of exactly the different size difference. It's a bit smaller, a little bit more intimate than going to DSC's convention, although I love it too. The big one in January or February, whenever it's scheduled. However, I will say the gala and that expo is just, God, it's so much fun.
It really is, and it's actually about a third the size of our regular, fall. I mean, wintertime, and we'll be back in Georgia again. I think really kind of the first weekend that time frame of January 2027. But and we'll have about at the summer show, we've got about a little over 400 booths, I think, and then of course Saturday night I've been very much involved and continue to be with the DSC Foundation, which is the granting arm of DSC. And last year we granted a little over $1 million to very highly vetted projects, if you will, anything having to do with conservation and education. And we will have our fundraiser the night of the July 25th. And of course, all those fantastic items that'll be for sale there at the auction will also be on onlinehuntingauctions.com. And before too very long, probably about the time this thing airs, or maybe a little bit thereafter, and people can actually bid there if they can't come to the summer show itself, or to the gala. But as you mentioned, we want to invite everybody to come out, and there'll be a good opportunity there to see and face to face with Dr. Mike Arnold, who happened to be our DSC Foundation Educator of the Year for 2026. So, going to have royalty there, by golly. So
oh, my goodness. Thank you for that. Yeah, just ask my kids how royal I am. But that's all right. That's all right. You and I both know that one. Yeah, I would really, really second what Larry just said. Y'all get on, and Russell Stacy actually is going to be on my podcast real soon, and he'll be discussing the gala again and the expo. But, y'all get online and bid on these items if you can't be there. But if you can be there, like I say, you will not be disappointed. It is a wonderful time.
And if people want to learn more about that summer show or the DSC Foundation and the DSC Gala or anything having to do with DSC to start with, they can go to www.bigame.org or to the foundation website, which is www.dscf.org. And two, they can sign up for the show there, and they'll direct you to the hotel and also area hotels in case that one fills up, which is probably going to be pretty close to being filled by the time this airs, which is not that far away from when we recorded. But excuse me, but yes, by all means, please be there. Mike, for somebody that wants to learn more about your podcast, more about bringing back the wild, bringing back the lions, all those things about you, how do they go about doing so?
All they have to do is go to MikeArnoldOutdoors.com, and that's the website, and it'll point them to the podcast is there that they can click on, and the books they can buy, and they'll see, where I'm speaking and just various things. And I would love to hear back from them if they have questions about things. So there's a way that they can do that too. And I say all this real vaguely. It is MikeArnoldOutdoors.com. That's correct. But my wife is the one Frances is the one that set up the website so beautifully. And I need her here actually to say, sweetheart, you need to tell them this, and this too.
Exactly.
And I'm like, yes, ma'am.
Understood.
But just go to MikeArnoldOutdoors.com. That'll get them all the way there.
Absolutely fantastic. Mike, thank you so much for joining us around the campfire this morning or this afternoon or whenever somebody listens to this. I look forward to catching up with you again before too very long. I know you're headed to Africa. I'm headed to on this Three Nations roe deer hunt. We'll get together after both those happen, and we'll get you back on here before too very long, even before the smoke disappears or the embers go out around the campfire. So thank you so very much for joining us.
DSC's Campfires with Larry Weishuhn has also been brought to you by The Crown Bar in LaGrange, Texas, the Texas Wildlife Association, Double Nickel Taxidermy, and Burnham Brothers Game Calls.
Did you know if your windows are bare, indoor temperatures can go up 20 degrees? Turn the temperature down with Blinds.com and get up to 50% off custom window treatments like solar roller shades and more during the Memorial Day mega sale. Whether you want to DIY it or have a pro handle everything, we've got you. Free samples, real design experts, and zero pressure. Just help when you need it. Shop up to 50% off site-wide and huge savings on doorbusters right now during the Memorial Day mega sale at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions apply.
You can't reason with the sun. Trust us, we've tried. This summer, it's time to put that angry ball of fire on mute. Columbia's Omni-Shade technology is engineered to protect you from the sun's harsh rays that can burn and damage your skin. The sun is relentless, but so is our gear. Level up your summer at Columbia.com to spend more time outside and less time slathering on aloe lotion. You're welcome. Columbia, engineered for whatever.